Hello everyone, this is Brain's Journey and welcome back to another function video. This is the last video in the main function series. After this we're going to be getting onto the functional dichotomies, just as we did the elemental dichotomies, to help us distinguish between the differences and similarities of the functions themselves instead of just providing straight descriptions. But today we're here to look at the last two functions, the id functions, the ignoring and the demonstrative. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The ignoring function. What's up with the ignoring function? What does it do? Why does it do it? The ignoring function is the antithesis to the base function. It is directly opposing the activities that we generally proclaim, our core values, and so it possesses very little use. It is seen as an annoyance by the individual because of its antithetical nature. It does not want to be used, the individual doesn't want to use it, in heavy preference of the base function. Because of that, this function is skilled and strong. We are often very good in this area, and the individual knows how to use this function well. But like I said, it is seen as superfluous and over-excessive, and it is, when possible, the base function is used in favor of the ignoring function. So it doesn't see too much use, the individual doesn't prefer it very much. As well as this, its expression is limited in public. We don't often portray this outward. This is not something that we go out and bring to society, unlike the base and creative functions in the ego. The id is more about things that we do for ourselves. So the ignoring function, while we may use it on our own in private excessively, it is not something that we want to show others. It is not something that is seen as valuable, of social merit. It's not something that we want to show others even. Because again, it is seen as superfluous. If we have to take care of these kinds of problems ourselves, if you experience a problem in the ignoring function, it's quite easy to take care of it, it's quite easy to get it out of the way, but in public, this is not something that we want to be doing. Moving on from that, it appears weak. You know, other people might look at the ignoring function and say, well, hey, he's weak in that area, she's weak in that area, they're not using it very much, they don't prefer to use it. But on the contrary, the usage is just boring. It's the individual doesn't want to use it. It's seen as unnecessary. So in an outside context, in an external context, people are going to see this function as weak, perhaps. But it's not really weak in reality. It is just, not something that the individual wants to be doing. So to sum it up, the ignoring function is more we're good at it, but it's the antithesis to the base function. It's something that we really don't want to be doing. It kind of counters the activities of the base function, and so why would we put any effort into it? That's kind of the thinking. So if we need to do it, we can do it, but for the most part, if we don't have to, we're not going to. Moving on to the eighth function, the demonstrative function. Now the demonstrative is a little bit different. We're a little bit more comfortable with the demonstrative, and it actually plays a very important part in our life. It's used quite often in the private sphere. This is still not something that we want to be going out and bringing to everybody, but it is still something that is ran through a lot. In our home life, in our private life, it's something that we do very often, but we just don't want to bring it outward for the most part. It's often just as strong as the base. The demonstrative, theoretically speaking, is just as strong as the base function. It's just not preferred. It's just not something, not viewed as an end in and of itself. It's viewed as a tool, but it does form a major part of our worldview for reasons that we'll get into in another series. But the demonstrative does hold a special place for the individual. It's just not something that they always want to be portraying outward. That's more reserved for the base and the creative functions. And what we do see with the demonstrative is that it does help the other functions. Like, we can use the demonstrative to aid the base in its activities, to aid the creative in its activities, but it normally will stay behind the scenes and just direct those activities on its own. It is viewed as obvious. When we're presented with information regarding the demonstrative function, we will exclaim, well, this is obvious, this is irrelevant, I already knew this. We already know what's going on with the demonstrative. It's like the suppressed base function. If somebody told us something about our base function, we would go, oh yeah, I know that, that's obvious. But see, the base function is something that's actually valued. The demonstrative is unvalued. So when we're taking information regarding the demonstrative, we're not going to like that. We're going to say, this is obvious, I already knew this, it's irrelevant, I'm already doing everything that I need to be doing here, and I don't need to receive more stimulation. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on here is that its appearance is sporadic. We don't use it all the time, but it is easy to use, and it is skilled, and we do, more often than not, find ourselves using it, whether we pay attention to it or not. So to sum it up, the demonstrative is very skilled, unvalued, often just as strong as the base, and aids a lot of our activities, but we more or less, reserve its expression to the private sphere, and it stays there because it's not something that we value as an end in and of itself, like I said. So now that we've gone over these two functions, the last two functions, the ignoring and the demonstrative, let's, for one last time, check out the blocking. What does it look like when they're put together? What do these two functions share in common? So these two functions form the id block. Obligatory. Not Freud, not Jung. This is just named after the concept. I've said this a million times, but I don't want any backlash because I know there'll be backlash if I don't say that. But yes, this is the id. It is an area where there are individualized passive skills. These are things that we do. These are things that we're good at. But we're not going to show other people. We're not going to go out and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm good at it. That's more or less reserved for the ego. The id is something that we do to maintain our survival needs, generally used to maintain our own needs, to maintain others' needs. For close friends or, people who we value, we may, engage our id to aid their lives. But it's not something that we're viewing as, this is the end-all be-all, more or less. This is something that I'm going to do to maintain myself because I'm strong with it. And that's all purpose that this block serves for me. The activities here are of little interest. If we were presented with activities, areas regarding the ignoring and demonstrative, we're going to say, I don't really want to be here. I don't want to be doing this too often. So generally, these two functions hold little interest to us on their own. Of course, we can engage them, but whether we want to engage them or not is, a question of variability. And then the last thing that we have down for the id is that it's not paid attention to often. These are, like I said, it's passive. These are passive skills. Things that we're just doing. We're just going through the motions. Kind of a routinized, application of our skills and strengths. We don't think about it too often. We're not going to say, oh, yes, I'm using my demonstrative all the time. We're just going to be doing it, not necessarily thinking about it. Again, I'm making a lot of comparisons to the ego here, but it really is a good contrast to the id. The ego, we're always going to be thinking about that stuff. We're always going to be able to point out the stuff that we're doing with our ego, but with our id, not so much. So what do we go over here today? We went over the seventh function, the ignoring, and the eighth demonstrative, and what they look like as a block, the id. The next few videos will be on function dichotomies, which are helpful. I know those videos can be kind of a drag, but they're very helpful for comparing and contrasting the properties of the functions, the elements, and then we'll see in the future the types. If you enjoyed the lecture, make sure to hit the like button. If you have any observations, comments, questions, then make sure to put them down below. And if you want to see more content, if you want to see more functional dichotomies, and then the next series we have after this, the Jungian dichotomies, we're finally going to be getting to some type stuff, then subscribe if you're interested in that. But for now, I will see you all in the next lecture.